It has been suggested that cities, in other words, urban landscapes, are somewhat analogous to living organisms. That's right. They grow, they stagnate, they fade away, they die, they need nourishment to remain viable, they have to evolve in order to remain alive. If we assume, rightly or wrongly, that urban growth, so city growing, emanates from the CBD, from the central business district, and progresses outwards, and let's just assume that, then we can also assume that there is more at work than simple randomness in the patterns or the growth. I guess if there's a pattern, then it's not random, right? One of the ways that city grows, or any city grows outwards, is along routes of transportation. Probably especially major transportation corridors, like in Southern California, of course, that would be the freeways, for example. If you think back to the urban models we've already looked at and the application to Cleveland that I did, and then sort of apply that to Southern California, especially if you live in Southern California like I do, you can probably see that the transportation routes are going to provide a logical avenue for growth. Can you kind of tell that? Let's take a look at this version of an urban growth model created by me. Although I created the model you're looking at, I did not create the concept for this model. The green circle right in the middle is the urban complex, the city. And the black lines are major transportation routes. That could be freeways, highways, roads, railways, whatever they are, okay? As the city grows in population, pressure is put on the surrounding non-urbanized land to convert to a more urban or suburban or exurban landscape. Because many of the people in the outlying suburbs or exurbs may need to commute into the city. You can telecommute, but if you actually need to physically be in a place in order to work, being close to a major transportation thoroughfare makes sense for people. And thus, the growth moves outwards along those transportation routes like this. Okay, can you see how the city kind of grew outwards along those transportation routes, almost like spikes? You can see the green representing the city or the urban structure, whatever it is stretching out along the highways or whatever form of transportation these routes provide. Let's assume they're highways or freeways. Do you recall which model this would be like? In other words, that growth followed along a transportation route? That would be correct, the sector model. Now you can see, you guys are smarter than I'm letting on. You guys are doing a really good job with this. Excellent. You can see that there is indeed a term for this, and the term is ribbon development. Okay, ribbon development means that the city grows outwards along major transportation routes. Now you can see in this wild green star that as this process continues, more and more land is filled in between these outstretched transportation routes, right? You can see how that's happening, that the city is literally not just stretching out, it's getting bigger, it's getting kind of fatter, if you want to call it that, okay? It's growing outwards and it's also filling in. That land in between is being both filled in and connected by the ever-growing city and even more, but smaller transportation routes. So spur routes that come off of the main transportation routes, thereby allowing both a bigger population attached to this particular city and the ability of that population to commute in and work in the city. Remember, it started like this, but now it looks like this. Now let's add one more wrinkle. Let's assume that the original landscape had other smaller towns, villages, even smaller cities in relatively close proximity to the much larger urban structure. Yes, you can, if you live in Southern California, see what is happening here. LA, Los Angeles, is the big city, but all of these other smaller places like Long Beach, Pasadena, Whittier, Orange, Santa Ana, Riverside. All of these at one point were separated from Los Angeles by open space. I can tell you myself, growing up in Lakewood and Long Beach, when my family would go to Knott's Berry Farm when I was a little kid, we would leave that area of Long Beach and we would drive out towards Knott's Berry Farm, and we would literally be going through dairy farms and strawberry fields and orange groves. I'm not kidding. That's all gone now. But now the whole thing is just one massive urban megacity complex. Let's assume that all of those red dots are other smaller urban settings, towns, small cities, whatever you want to refer to them as. Notice that they are all being attached through the growth of the large urban complex, and they're blending into the overall regional urban settlement. This process is called conurbation. You can see the term right there. This is the grouping together of cities due to massive urban growth. Remember Mexico City? The plaza, the Zocalo, right in the middle? You can see it there. That was the site of origin of what is now one of the world's largest cities. Remember, originally this was Tenochtitlan, the Aztec city, and then the Spanish tore it down and they built their city there off of that plaza in this north, south, east, west grid pattern, the Spanish colonial grid system. This is what urban sprawl is about. From there, the city grew outwards like that. I took this picture maybe a mile and a half away from the Zocalo, from the plaza, but you can see the city stretches as far as you can see. Of course, it's helped out by having a flat landscape that provides, seemingly endless amounts of space to sprawl out onto, which in the case of Mexico City, it basically has done that. It's occupied basically every single square inch of flat land until recently when it was kind of running out of space, and it's running out of other things like water as well. But we can see the same kind of urban sprawl in Los Angeles, and that's what this is. It's urban sprawl, sprawling out across the landscape, particularly flat landscapes. As I said, all of us who live here in Southern California know that Los Angeles is really lots of other cities grouped together. Conurbation accomplished this through urban sprawl, in other words. So if you look at this map of Southern California, you're probably familiar with it, especially if you live in Southern California. Most of us who live in Southern California probably identify by the actual city you live in, like Santa Ana or Anaheim or Long Beach or Huntington Beach, rather than Los Angeles as your home city. Even though the reality is that Los Angeles is the main city in the area and the city from which all of this growth has occurred. If you are in some other place in the world, so likely outside the United States, and someone asks you, where are you from? Generally what you do is you kind of narrow it down, right? So somebody asks where you're from, you say you're from the United States. Well, where in the United States? I'm from California. I've been to California. Where in California? Well, I'm from Los Angeles. You aren't going to say I'm from Anaheim. No offense, but most people don't know what that is. But most people in the world do know what Los Angeles is, right? Of course that's true. And if they say, well, I've been to Los Angeles, where in Los Angeles? In my case, I'd say Long Beach. And in some cases, they say, well, where in Long Beach? Because I stayed in Long Beach. And you see what's happening. We're narrowing it down. But if we're speaking to each other in Southern California, we tell the actual city that we're from. And if I ask you where you're from and you said you're from Los Angeles, I am literally going to assume that you are from the city of Los Angeles. I'm not going to assume that you're from Pomona. So we understand that Los Angeles really is a whole bunch of cities all grouped together and all glued together as a result of urban sprawl. In other words, conurbation, okay? Take a look at this map of Southern California. Now you can see that I have pointed out several of the major cities. Los Angeles is where the red arrow is at, but you can see Pasadena and Pomona and Whittier and Torrance and Long Beach and Newport Beach and Santa Ana, all places if you live in Southern California that I am pretty certain that you yourself are familiar with. Now look at this partial map of Orange County, and you can see that I have pointed out the city of Orange. You may very well be familiar with the city of Orange, especially if you live in Orange County, or particularly if you go to Santa Ana College. You almost certainly, if you are physically going to Santa Ana College, are familiar with the city of Orange. Maybe because the center of Orange has a relatively well-known, really cool place that's called the Orange Circle. Here it is from the sky. You see the orange circle right in the middle. Here's the concentric zone model. And while not nearly as large and complex, nevertheless, the similarities are clear. Can you see the similarities? Good. And here's the orange circle on the ground, right where that fountain's at in the middle, kind of where that little park is at. My point is that the city of Orange operates in a lot of ways as its own independent city, its own urban structure, like most cities in Southern California do. But in reality, it is part of a much larger megacity, which is Los Angeles. Take a look again at this map of Southern California and those cities. And now we can see that Los Angeles really is a multi-nuclei, multinodal city that has commonalities with all 3 or 4, depending on how you want to count it, models, but certainly carries along characteristics of the multinuclei peripheral models. And to tie that to my own weird green star model that represents urban development, you can see how this can be applied as well. In other words, how this model that's right in front of you can be applied. As the city grew outwards, it kind of absorbed, the main city grew outwards, it kind of absorbed all these other smaller cities. Keep this in mind as we move to the next parts, plural, of the lecture. Why do cities grow outwards? Just think about that. Okay, onwards.